Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everyone. You know, June is National Family Month, and we've been doing a lot of interviews about books that are for young adults. And this is definitely one of those. It's gritty, apparently. That's what some people say, but it's really a cool read, and it's more geared towards the upper teens. It is called The Secret Song of Shelby Rey, and that's right, we're going to talk about music. And we have Rayne Lacko, the author, here, and you may know her from her other book as well called A Song for the Road. So she's got a lot of songs. Welcome, Rayne. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me, Lisa.
So I did say gritty because you said people are saying it's got the grit in there.
Yeah. It's there's a lot going on in there. It has some magic realism with the music, and it's a little bit of a sex, drugs, and rock and roll story. But there are a lot of layers to Shelby's life. She's lost her father to suicide. Her mother is not handling that loss very well. And she's just graduated from high school, and she's really not sure what she wants to do as she transitions into adulthood. And I think that, she's not alone in that. There are a lot of young people who don't know exactly what they want to do after high school. Shelby is dealing with some mental health issues, which is not making the process any easier.
And I love that you're doing, after high school, because I think that it's left off the list quite a bit for books. It is. And I think people are scared to tackle it because it is where you're truly becoming that adult, and you are making some life decisions. Even, should I go to college? I know that's a big question now. And then you've got the romance side of it, and then you're dealing with obviously she's got adult things happening with her parents on top of that. So that's when, you are dealing with adult worlds at that point, and a lot can happen. So did you find that a lot of people write? Because you don't really, maybe like 14 through 16, but I feel like 17 up, it's kind of dumped there.
You're right. And when I wrote the original draft for the story, she was actually older, and that story was a little bit different in that I was looking at it from more of an adult point of view. And in some ways it was sadder because she hadn't figured her life out in her early 20s. But I think that everybody's on a different pace. There's no timing or finish line that you have to have everything figured out by. And thank goodness for that, because people 30 and 40, 50 don't always meet that finish line when they think they're going to. But I had an earlier draft of this that came out in 2015 in a different title. It was kind of a different story. She was older, and it ended up getting picked up by a hospital in Los Angeles. And they had a music therapy program for children from babies up to 21, I believe. And it was fiction. It's not a therapy book by any means. That version wasn't, and this version isn't either. But they were using it in music therapy to help their patients, a lot of them nonverbal, understand about how to feel and internalize music, and how to use music as a way of expressing yourself when words are not sufficient, or they've been misinterpreted so often that you're afraid to speak. And so that's kind of what Shelby goes through. And I hadn't set out to make a music therapy book by any means. And I was very surprised that they were using it. And they came back to me and said, what other music therapy materials do you have? And that actually opened up a whole nonfiction side of my writing that I also do. I have some books out for nonfiction for young people.
Wow.
Yeah. So in that process, I've rewritten the book. It has a different title. The story has been reworked, and she is now a lot younger, but there is more mature subject matter in there because it started out as an older book. But I think that even in the YA that is quite young, I think that there's a lot of mature topics that are covered in YA, even if the protagonist is 14 to 16.
Read YA novels. Why not? And I think they're super important because it allows a reader to make their own decisions when they're reading, and maybe reread or take it as slow or as fast as they want. And if it's something they're dealing with, it's something for them to internalize and not have to hear from anybody else about what their beliefs are. That's when they are actually being able to start to think about something, maybe not be afraid, so they have to face it, whatever it is, and start to think. And I think books do a wonderful job in helping, because no matter what, teen is going to make a decision, just like we all do, whether it's right or wrong. it really doesn't matter until you put your foot in it, and then you're going to deal with the ups and downs, you know?
Yeah, I really like the way you worded that. It sounds like it's just a really wonderful pathway to figuring out who you are. And I feel like if you are living in, it's a safe place to live in a protagonist's footsteps. You know, you're not in any danger, but you're able to feel and experience the stakes that they have. And you can see when someone's making a bad decision and when a protagonist, you know, has a dumb idea and goes and tries something, and you learn from that. And also you can see when they take courage in a very difficult situation to step up. And, you know, it's a great way to figure out I could do that too, or what might work, or where I can go to find a safe place, or what kind of adults can be trusted, or which ones can't. I mean, all of those things, I think books teach us in a really safe way. And you're right, in the reader's own time and pace.
Yeah. Now, do people like parents buy books for their young adults in their life? Have you seen that? Or are they going on their own and buying?
I do think that the parents are the big book buyers for sure, but I have got two teens and I teach creative writing to teens and to university students as well. And what I see is that their taste in books is very, very personal. So I do believe that if you're a big reader as a young person, your school library and your ability to access books on your own is really, really important, because I think a lot of young people like to read things that their parents don't know about. And it's not about secrecy. It's about what you're talking about. They've been known a certain way their entire life as a child. And as they move towards adulthood, they want to figure out what that's going to look like, how they might blossom or how they might change, or what they might leave behind in childhood to make room for as a young adult.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, sometimes that means not stepping away from mom and dad to do that. And I have an 18 and 12 and 20-year-old, so I'm in the mix of that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And it's so hard because you can't smother them either. And you want, it's almost like you want to read the book before your kid gets to read it. And that's going too far too. It's, I think it can make good discussions.
Too. I love that. I love when parents and kids are watching the same shows and reading the same books, but separately, and then come back and discuss it, because some of the stuff they don't want their parents to know that, they don't want to have to react to a sexy scene in front of their mom and dad, but they want to talk about the issues. And in my book, there are a lot of issues. There's drug abuse, there's fame, there's homelessness, there's a lot of things that are taking place in Shelby's life that are real and that happen to people. I mean, even if you are looking at just social media, fame is kind of one step away for quite a few young people. And there's a lot of issues that they have that are both wonderful and giant burdens at the same time. And great to talk about them, I guess.
Yeah, I look at what happens to child stars, and their life is not theirs when their brains are still forming,
Yes.
Their thoughts are forming, and they're maybe acting as a role, as maybe it's acting, maybe it's music, and they've had to readdress their lives pretty much later, made some, choices that weren't good for them, just because of that industry. And the music industry, I know my mom was just like, oh, no, no, no. And then I did it.
What's your background in the music industry?
Songwriting and singing, and ended up in a rock kind of blues band. And of course, got in, listen, don't date the bass player. I'm just saying. But yeah, and it continued on past my teens and into, my 20s. And I saw things I did not know existed. And I don't know if I ever need to see anything like that again, but it wasn't that bad. But there were drugs and things that I didn't even know about. And I don't know if it's just because I was leading a different life, coming from a different country. And so, because we lived in South Africa, and that's where I was raised in high school, and I just did not know that there were all these different kinds of drugs. I mean, I'm not stupid, and I didn't take them, but I didn't realize like the kind of drugs people were on in the band and why they were acting really weird, like paranoid. One guy thought he had the military spying on him in his apartment, and I'm going, what? I'm not getting this, that he's high, and then everybody else knew, but I was really, and then you don't want to be around it either. Right. So, and we had our business, and our clients for our magazine were the people hiring us for our performances, and then the bands wouldn't behave, and that didn't look good on our magazine. So that was the end of that.
I have some stories.
Oh, I have some stories. Trust me, there could be a book written on our band. Yeah, but it was fun. It was fun while it
Yeah,
lasted.
this is really
So
fascinating. And you're and emigrating to the United States and everything.
it's fun, but you go through a lot, and that's why I think when reading YA books, it really it's part of how I grew up was reading because I was always ahead in school as well because I was went to so many different schools and I graduated with people older than me. So I was catching up and I was watching too, but I was always a little bit behind them, which they keep yelling at me now that we're all in our mid whatever part of our lives, and they keep, will you catch up? And I'm like, no, not catching up. But yeah, that's where I'm going back to this, the teen part, the music, the bands, it is very alluring. It's like, you're not supposed to date the bad guy, but you do, we're addicted to a danger in a way as young girls.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that when Shelby meets this band, there's a lot of things to like about the different people who are in, and they have their own struggles also, as you're pointing out. And it's not just drug use, it's a matter of what can fame can do and
Hmm.
how it can trick you. It seduces you to always want more of it, but it's also giving you tremendous pain and a lack of privacy. And people, the more fame that you have, it feels like the less people can see the real you
Hmm.
or want to see the real you. They've already made a decision about what kind of person you are, and they want you to live up to that. And it can be very lonely. It's very hard to be understood. In this particular story, when Shelby touches a person, she believes that she can hear the song that's inside them, and their song is their truest truth. It's like everything, the dark and the light. It's their truth. And most people do not like when someone knows every secret about them just by touching their arm. So she gets into a lot of trouble. But for someone who is in the spotlight, who maybe narcissistic, maybe a little shallow, maybe loving fame a little too much, and you lose yourself, and Shelby comes along, she helps Zach to understand what's inside him, to value what's inside him. And it's, wonderful and terrifying at the same time.
So yeah, dating the band. I'm telling you, no, I won't go against that, but yeah, at all. But things happen. Well, and the fame thing is really real right now because look how many of the, teens are always already becoming influencers while they're in school on social media. And with that comes bullying and, you can't let your hair down kind of thing. And everyone's watching, like you were saying, and then it becomes a drama. It really does because you don't really realize what it's like to go viral. And some people like that. And then some people like, oh my gosh, how
Yeah.
would you like to be Honey Boo Boo when your mom puts you on screen as a kid?
Yeah.
That to me was wrong. That's just personally my personal beliefs. So you're in America as a sensation. Look at Drew Barrymore, right? She went through so much. She grew up in front of everybody, going through all kinds of struggles. And I think that kids don't really realize what that can do to them.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But so where did Shelby come from for you?
That's a good question. Years ago, I mean, a long time before my first child was born 20 years ago, I conceived of her character. My first vision of her was that she had been through some trauma, and she had just stopped talking, and she was always wearing really large headphones to cover herself and just listening to the radio all the time. And it occurred to me that and if you look at all different genres of music around the world, there is a song for every emotion. There's a song for every experience. And so my first vision of her was that she only would speak in song lyrics. And I started writing the story that way, and it was a ton of fun. And as I did more and more research, there really is a song for every particular human emotion or situation. But you can't use song lyrics as dialogue because it's a copyright infringement. However, in the story to this day, a lot of the time, Shelby and other people in the story, their dialogue are song titles. So if you're
Oh.
watching and you're reading, the story's happening and unfolding, but sometimes the words are song titles, all
Cool.
different genres.
That's fun. It makes people slow down and think.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And there's never been, I mean, throughout history, over millennia, people have from all different cultures and races and eras have had music, and had music to celebrate. They've had music to put their baby to sleep. They've had music to tell stories and to be when they're reunited. I mean, and to honor their country. I think that music, there's no one who isn't touched by it. as soon as when a baby is first born, it's one of its first earliest experiences is being rocked in its parents' arms and having a song sung to it. And we all dance to a song at our wedding, and music has populates our entire lives, and we all have
Yeah.
a soundtrack of our own individual experience.
It's really, really true. We do a lot of podcasts covering this and the importance of music and music and the arts to us is very honest,
I
you
agree.
know,
Well,
very honest.
when that hospital in LA came back and said, "Do you have more music therapy materials for me?" I'm not a music therapist, and I've had the same thought, exactly what you're saying, that music is fantastic. I mean, obviously, I've written 2 novels based on the experience of hearing music, performing music, what it means in your life, what its history is. However, I love the arts, and I think that there's the reason that the arts are so incredibly wide and diverse is because everybody needs to find their own self-expression. So whether it's dance or pottery or painting or poetry, home decorating, fashion, there's all different ways that we can express ourselves that don't involve that are as unique as the human person who
Mm.
is expressing them. So when I wrote Dream Up Now with my friend who's actually at this hospital, we talked to all different leaders in different arts industries and looked at how they came to their careers and how they figured out how to work in the arts and use the arts to be able to express themselves. And then we created a whole bunch of different social emotional learning activities that were arts based for teens to do. And I've done a subsequent book for younger students, but it's so fascinating. I love the arts.
Well, it's a way to open up, and when you think about as kids, we all played music together. Who got the new album? Let's listen. We
And
had
listen to
listening
on repeat.
parties. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was part of it. And it was like, who liked what? I mean, we
And
even had wars against it. Like if there was, I remember when in high school, there was this whole thing. It was Dire Straits versus Pink Floyd. And I'm going, why do we have to have a versus anything? But it was like, if you like this one, you're more of a geek than the other one. And I'm like, well, then I'm a super geek because I like them all. So it's just it's interesting that it becomes part of who you are as an individual, what you listen to. That becomes who you are.
Well, I think you can, as a teenager, find your friends through different bands that you like and join forces. And like you can be, Swifties together or whatever it is that
With
like
these.
in this, those are a tight knit group and they're an
Yeah,
army.
don't mess with it.
They're global. But there is something to be said, though. I think there's a lot, I mean, especially in this day and age where music is digital and it's just available every place, you really can listen to music from around the world and be very diverse in your music taste. And I think that a lot of young people are. I think that they, like us, we would have been fans of a certain type of music. Maybe you're talking about rock and roll, but that doesn't mean that you don't love classical or that you didn't go into jazz and blues later in life. There's not a country song that made you cry at some point, or there wasn't a dance party that you went to that was electronic. You didn't have, of course you can still have a great time. It just means
Yeah.
that all the different, none of us are just one note. None of us are just one type of person. I think that's very, very rare. I think that we need to be honoring and exploring all the different parts of who we are. And I think that music does that beautifully because there's so much available that hits you right just the right way depending on your mood.
Yeah, it's interesting with music because musicians don't want to be pigeonholed, but all the marketing people want to pigeonhole you.
No, when it comes to marketing in books too, like, okay, what shelf do I put this on? What I need to know exactly this thing. And that's very difficult. And I'm finding out more and more that with this book that, like I said, it's not a romance. There's romance in it, but it's no more romance than more, I would say, even contemporary fiction or literary fiction because it doesn't fit that romance mold, even though there's
I'm not 100% on the fantasy thing because of her superpower of, hearing everyone's song and, being able to, and so it's not supernatural 100%. I like a little bit of music magic is what I would touch on it. And it's still coming of age, right?
It
I think
absolutely is. It
so.
absolutely
It's, yeah.
sure. I mean, you don't coming of age. I mean, I do hope it trends higher and higher because I do feel like in this, I think that young people are taking a longer time to figure out what they want. When people used to sometimes go into apprenticeships at 16, and as you said, 18, you already were working. But I feel like there's a lot of children who are not children, young people who are 18 to 25 who are still finding themselves and who are taking their time. And I think that's fine. We live longer and we can have children later in life. And if you can heal yourself, figure out what you want, who you want to be, that's really wonderful.
That's why I recommend travel. Yeah, as soon as you finish high school, people go right into college. And I didn't, I didn't because of living in a different country. And I was going to do journalism. And then here's my mom with a magazine. Was kind of what am I, doing? I should just go right into it. And I would have had to do it in Afrikaans, and that wasn't going to happen. Yeah, doing any kind of writing or journalism in a different language was not going to be easy. But it is interesting because I think you're also appealing to people coming together through music lovers. And that's a huge audience. I mean, what would the world be without music? It would totally suck. I mean, it just doesn't exist. I love to wake up to birds and music, and it can totally change a bad day. It's super powerful, right? So I think a lot of people are going to come together just because let's read this book, and I can see discussions coming. So it's like a earlier version of book clubs for youth,
I love questions. I love talking about books. And so I would be so happy if someone was reading it and did want to talk about these things. I'm absolutely reach out to me. I'm on Instagram and I'm easy to find. It's at Rayne Lacko on Instagram. And so I love talking about it and I want to hear people's experiences and I want to know their questions. It's big. It's good stuff.
And everyone, again, you can go to raynelacko.com. The book is out, The Secret Song of Shelby Rey. Now, what led you to write more on the young adult side of things? Was that because of your children that you were inspired to write young adults? I mean, you're doing nonfiction as well, but what led you to it?
Such an interesting time in your life. And I find that even in adult books, there's a lot of flashbacks to childhood and to teen years. And it's kind of the start of everything. A lot of things that are going on in an adult's life really begin in those earlier years. And we get into a pattern. And I think it's just a really critical time where you are busy figuring out who you want to be. Yeah, it's something that's like a full-time job is thinking about the adult that you're becoming. I think when you are an adult, oftentimes thinking about your job or your children or the rent or you're caught up in that world. But I think when you're a young person, you're consciously crafting yourself. I find that fascinating. I think it's important to always be consciously crafting yourself and that, but it's just a beautiful time when it was just rife with possibility and the expectation when you're a teenager isn't that you have everything figured out. It's that you are at the stepping stone of figuring out what life is about and who you want to be and what it all means. And so it's just kind of magical and scary and wonderful. For writers, it can take you anywhere, right?
And they have energy,
Yes, energy. Yeah, and a little bit of fearlessness and a little bit of, like not having as much, like not having, say, 40, 50 years of life experience. You're trying everything out for the first time, and that is fabulous. So a lot of things when you're through books, you get to experience things for the first time again. But as a teenager, it's really wonderful to be able to take your chances and go out there and see what's going to happen. And failing is how we learn. And try, doesn't work out. That is the definition of learning. So it's all good. Yeah, making mistakes. Then you're in it. You're learning.
You have to be excited about a mistake. I always get all panicked and paranoid, and then I go, "Oh, I'm human. That's okay."
Yeah. Something's going to go wrong. Okay, all you're doing is learning. If it goes right, maybe you're learning too. But I think when something goes terribly wrong or even a little bit wrong, you've learned so much more and really learning is not, or growing is not just experience, but it's reflecting on that experience.
Relationships, that's the thing. Shelby gets into relationships and she's got this extra superpower, right? And so there's that part that gives her a little bit of benefit, but then people are changing. That's why they always talk about, your high school sweetheart. Sometimes that works out. People already sometimes that is like one of those beautiful romances that truly, I don't know, was staged before they were even born or something. Something happened. And then there's, those of us who, just there's me who doesn't care anymore. But that's just me because I'm into traveling more. I have a whole different lifestyle, But there's people is at that age group. You're having relationships and you have to realize and learn. I remember reading Khalil Gibran, and he was talking about relationships, and it really made a huge impact on me as a teen, because it gave me this like, oh yes, you can be yourself, you can be in a relationship with someone else, and they still have their self, and then you have a relationship between each other that is completely separate. And I thought, this is the best stuff everywhere. Everyone should learn this, you know? And I think it allowed independence. And yet I had a friend who really had a hard time being alone and felt like, oh, for in a relationship, it's morning, noon, and night. And I was like, no, you know, it's okay. And I think there's that balance of expectations that at that age group, we create our own expectations in that age group, and then we try to still do the expectations. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you're not out on Friday night, you're not cool. And we made that stuff up. And we know that's not true. But we made that stuff up, didn't we? And if you break up with a guy and then you're not out on that Friday night, oh, now everyone's going to make up a story of what is going on. You see what I mean? Where you have to really learn to be okay in your own skin.
And that's
Good book.
that's
What a good
lifetime
book.
work.
Yeah.
I agree. That's part of Shelby's journey, actually, is to really find her own voice and listen to her own song. And that takes a long time. And it's difficult for her in that so much of her loneliness is that she's so able to be intimate with other people's interior songs, but she's not receiving that. She's not being heard herself. And so that's part of her journey, is to find her own voice and to listen to herself and get there. And that's not easy to do. I mean, that's metaphorical, but I mean, in reality, it's not easy to fully become aware of oneself and honor oneself. It's a journey.
That's the journey of life, I think. Yeah. And you're allowed to change and reinvent anytime you want, you know? And there's songs for that. I was going to say too, you know, the other part of it is her parents, and having to tackle something where your parents aren't picture perfect is a very difficult thing as well as a teen. And because you're raised that they know everything kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's really hard when it's something, you know, like addiction, suicide. Those are some heavy topics. And when it's parents, that's a really difficult thing. And I think I love that you're tackling all these issues, because it's so important.
I don't have all the answers. I don't necessarily resolve those problems, but I think it's important to talk about them and acknowledge that they exist, and that there are young people that don't have ideal parents, and you know, alcoholism. And yeah, so I don't resolve it, and I don't have the answers. But one thing that was important to me as I was going through this and looking at these issues myself, there are the social worker and a psychiatrist that are in the story, who are a married couple, and they have their own problems, honestly. But they are in Shelby's life. And as I was writing it, and as I was having them interact with her, not on a professional, well, the social worker does interact with her professionally, but the psychiatrist never takes her case, but they interact quite a few times. What I found that I never set out to do was that they became her ideal parents. They gave her what healthy parents can give a young person. And while she's 18 and she's an adult now and she's free to do what she wants to, I think it's never too late to be parented. And often the responsibility falls to the young person to parent themselves. It was a really interesting writing experience to look at, what does this young person need? What kind of guidance do they need? And what makes a good parent in this situation? I don't know. It's kind of, you know, I'm a parent, so it was just an interesting exercise from my point of view as well. And so I think that on that level, the book really works for adults, in that it explores how you care about somebody and how you help someone that you care about who's going through a hard time. How to parent a young person who does not want your help or is fighting you. That all that happens.
Oh yeah, oh yes, the teen emotions. Oh yes, we can't forget about those. We can't forget that. No, but I think this is fantastic that you've put it all there, because the most important thing too is when someone is reading a book that is touching on really hard issues that they may be going through, and you can't even talk to your friends sometimes you don't want to.
Up to you, because it's too heavy.
It's too heavy. Yeah, it's too heavy. And at least you're not alone in the world thinking you are alone. And I think that happens to teens a lot. They're carrying the weight of of the world on their shoulders, and they don't necessarily have to, you
Right.
know?
Then will retreat and believe they're the only one feeling that way. I do see that a lot. I know that that's, common for young people, but when I teach creative writing, I that all the time where they really truly believe that no one has ever felt awkward except for them, or no one has ever
Oh,
rejected before, and this is their experience alone. And that's really just makes me want to help them all the more that what they're going through is so natural and part of growing.
yeah. No, it's great. So anything else coming out after this? What are you working on? We want the scoop.
Well, I'm formulating in my mind an idea for a book that kind of this. I'm not sure that it's going to be YA. It's going to be more about what it's like to be living the human life and what happens after life. Whether I'm kind of being
Cool.
vague about this, but it's going to cross time and countries and cultures and also planes of existence.
How cool is that?
Happens with the soul in different scenarios, and it's going to be fiction, obviously, because I have no idea. But yeah,
Yeah.
a romance that is over time and ends in a way that has to do with good and evil.
This is fantastic. This is fantastic. I like this. Yeah, because I think because you could write this as fiction, but one day you'll find out it's all true. Maybe just different characters, but because we don't know. We really don't. And
Yeah.
it's just, why has everybody been drawing the same green alien for years? I mean, there's something to it.
We don't know what happens with the soul, but we have ideas about it, right? And we have faith, and there's also stories of children who have complete memories of a life as an adult in some other country they have no business knowing about, but they can talk about it,
Hmm.
there's all kinds of things, like all kinds of fun research I'd like to do. And I'm really into ancient civilizations. I'm master's humanities. I love different cultures and languages. I just want
Cool.
to play. It'll be fantasy, obviously, and no one knows for sure what happens to the soul. But I think it's worth exploring and having fun with.
Sounds fun. How
Yeah.
much fun do you have? Do you listen to music while you write?
I don't. I listen to music after I write. I go for walks or I'll have it in the car. But when I'm writing, I have to have complete silence because I will be that character in my mind, and I'll think like that character and talk like that character in my mind. And so I have to just have complete silence. And so it's kind of, I mean, if you read the book, you'll see that Zach is nothing like me. Shelby is nothing like me. And so it's just a matter of like me getting into their world and into their language and the pace of how they talk and the words that they choose. And I need complete silence for that. So it's a weird little quirk.
Yeah, there you are. Some calm time. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rayne. It's been great to have you on the show. Congratulations. Another book is out, everyone. Again, you can go get The Secret Song of Shelby Rey. It is out now. You can also go to Rayne's website, raynelacko.com, and that is linked in the episode notes. And of course, happy Family Month, everyone. Hey, you got to celebrate family, the good and the bad, or I should say the good and the quirky.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to all of your audience for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.